Hey there. Well, good morning. Well, I'm thankful that the hurricane missed us last week, and I'm thankful for weather people who give us forecasts and the latest updates of, um, what a storm might be currently doing. But you don't want to just listen to anybody to give you the latest updates on weather, do you? You want to listen to somebody who's qualified, somebody who knows how to use weather technology to track the weather. And really, that's the way it is with most things in life, I think. You want people who are qualified in certain things. If you're going to have surgery, you want somebody who's qualified as a surgeon. If you're going to, if you were to see a building that were on fire, it was pretty significant, you would want somebody who is qualified as a firefighter to come and put it out. And the Bible teaches that you're going to have people leading your local church, and you want them to be qualified too. So this morning, we're actually going to be looking at two different passages. We don't normally do that, but we're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and then we're just going to turn over just a couple of pages to the book of Titus and look at a short passage in chapter 1. So 1 Timothy chapter 3 and then Titus chapter 1. We'll read those back to back. They're very, very similar, but they're worded a little bit different, so you get a little bit different perspective of the thing that Paul's talking about here. Here at Eleele Baptist Church, we're going to be voting on and electing church elders here at the end of the month, at the end of August. And so we've been going through a sermon series on what the Bible says about church elders. And again, this might not be the most exciting subject, but it is very important for us to think about, because who our church leaders are is going to affect our church in a major way. And God has given us as a congregation the responsibility to select our church leaders. And so far, we've looked at what church elders are. We've looked at what they do, and we've talked about how they're pastors. A church elder is just basically a pastor. They don't all have the same specific functions. If you've got different church elders, they don't all do the same thing exactly. But they do have the same general function of overseeing the local church and giving godly instruction and biblical recommendations to the church body. We've also looked at how many church elders, how many church elders are you supposed to have? Well, we've looked at that, and basically, the Bible doesn't really give us a set number, but there is a biblical pattern of having more than one elder. So that's what we might call a plurality of elders. The exact number is going to depend on the size of the church and the church's preference. Here at Eleele Baptist, we've chosen to have at least 4 elders, and we've chosen for one of those, at least one of them, to be a staff elder, and that's just somebody who comes on as a paid elder or a paid pastor, and chosen to be more involved in preaching and teaching and to assume certain leadership roles. And we've chosen to have at least 3 lay elders. That would be elders who are volunteers. 2 of those we've chosen to serve as trustees for the church. And so our voting and election at the end of the month is going to be for lay elders. Now, next week, we're going to finish up our series talking about elders, and we're going to look at how elders should be appointed in the church, or how they should be installed. But this week, we're going to be looking at the question, what are the qualifications for church elders? What are the qualifications for them? So, also, in this video, I'm gonna, for this particular sermon, we're gonna split it in 2. So this will be part 1, and then there will be a part 2 right after that. But in the New Testament, Paul wrote several epistles. That's That's what we might call letters that he wrote to different people, different churches. And two of these letters were to a guy by the name of Timothy. He was a fellow pastor and somebody he mentored as pastor. There was another guy by the name of Titus who he also mentored. And he wrote two letters to Timothy, and they're called 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, and the letter he wrote to Titus is called Titus. And so in these three short epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, Paul gives a lot of instruction as it relates to the pastoral ministry. And that's why oftentimes these three letters are referred to as the pastoral epistles. There's a lot of things Paul writes about in 1 Timothy and in Titus that's very similar. And one of those things is what to look for when selecting a pastor, or what to look for when you're selecting an elder. Qualifications for a pastor or an elder. Again, we've showed that the words pastor and elder, they really mean the same thing in the New Testament. They're interchangeable. And also, we've seen how the word bishop means the same thing as pastor and elder in the New Testament. And of course, the word for bishop is often translated as overseer. Now, in our passages this morning, Paul is going to refer to pastors as overseers in the 1 Timothy passage. And he's going to refer to them as elders and as overseers in the Titus passage. And so Paul talks about the qualifications of church elders in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 7. And he also talks about them in Titus chapter 1, verses 5 to 9. And these two passages, they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. They're almost like parallel passages, almost like, what you think of when you're maybe reading an account of Jesus in the book of Matthew, and then you read the same account in the book of Luke. They're very similar. They may not be exactly the same, but they're similar. So you get kind of two perspectives of the same way of thought, or the same narrative, or somewhere along those lines. So that's kind of what you get here. You get Paul teaching and instructing about the qualifications of church elders in two different letters. Okay, so it's good to look at them both at the same time. That's what we're going to do this morning. Our church bylaws, they also reference these two passages for us to consider when selecting church elders. So let's just go ahead and take a look at them. We'll read the first one. So in 1 Timothy, if you may want to open your Bibles there if you haven't already. But 1 Timothy chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 1, and we're going to read down to verse 7. And it says, "The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, where he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil." All right, so let's just turn over to Titus and see what he has to say about the qualifications for elders there. So Titus chapter 1, we're going to start in verse 5. We're going to read down to verse 9. And he says to Titus, he says, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order, and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. For an overseer, as God's steward, must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, but hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine, and also to rebuke those who contradict it. All right, so there's a lot to be said here. I mean, more than we really have time to address this morning. But what I want to do is to briefly point out 5 general qualifications of a church elder. All right, 5 general qualifications of a church elder. In this video, we'll just look at the first one. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the first one and the second one, especially the second one. There's some questions in there. I think it's good to kind of address some hot button topics. So we'll look at the first one, spend a little bit of time on that, and we'll stop the video, start the second one, and we'll look at the second, third, fourth, and fifth qualifications there. The last 3 will be very short, but number 2 I'll spend a little bit of time on. All right, so one general qualification of a church elder is that he would have a godly character and example. A godly character and example. That his character would be godly, and that he would be a godly example to others. Now, all of us as people have flaws and sin in our lives. All of us as Christian believers have flaws and sin in our lives. All of us as church elders and pastors have flaws and sin in our lives. Church elders are not perfect. I mean, far from it. They make mistakes. They sin. However, when compared with others, they should be good examples. They should be good role models. Their lives should reflect a godly character. They should be, somebody who's a godly example. And so this is what it means to be above reproach. And so when we look at these 2 passages that we just read, Paul gives a list of things regarding what it looks like to be above reproach. Now, I don't think this is an exhaustive list. That is, there are more things that could probably be added to it. If it was exhaustive, then I think the 2 lists in 1 Timothy and Titus would be exactly the same, but they're not, right? So he's just trying to just give us some major things to look for in a potential elder's character and behavior to see if they're qualified. And so some of the things he talks about here is that it should be someone who thinks with a sober mind, somebody who's not out of control, somebody who has a good reputation both in the church but also in the community that he lives in general. It should be somebody who's friendly and welcoming towards others, somebody who is gentle. It should be somebody who doesn't practice getting intoxicated. It should be somebody who's not violent. It should be somebody who's not overly argumentative or quick-tempered. It should be somebody who does not overvalue the possession and accumulation of money or things, material things. Somebody who would, it shouldn't be somebody who would serve as an elder primarily to make money at it. It's like, I'm not as concerned about actually doing the job as an elder as I am getting the money, getting paid from it. It shouldn't be somebody like that. It should be somebody who's humble. That is, they're not arrogant. They're not somebody who trusts more in themselves than they do trusting in God. It should be somebody who loves what's good, somebody who loves what is upright, somebody who loves what is godly, someone who's disciplined in their life. And these are just examples of what an elder should look like. Again, an elder is not going to be perfect in these things. But there should be a pattern in their lives of being good examples in these areas to the church. Years ago, I saw a church that was looking for a pastor for quite a long time. And it came out that the search committee was tired. And in so many words, they kind of communicated, we just want to get this over. We just want to get somebody in here. I mean, been going on for so long. I want to get this position filled. And eventually somebody came along. They were very talented with pastoral skills, as well as talented with a lot of other things. And you know what? Pastors need to be, they need to have certain talents. They need to have certain abilities. But there were some people in the church that were questioning certain character traits of this particular pastor. And long story short, the church ignored the concerns and just went on and hired the pastor. And soon after, the bad character traits started coming out, and the church experienced probably one of the most difficult circumstances in their history. They were able to move beyond it eventually, but it was tough at the time. Now, before I became pastor, I once served as the chair of a pastor search committee, and we all that were on there, we just did the best we could. And one of the things I really tried to encourage the rest of the committee, I said, guys, let's try to value a pastor's character above their talents. In other words, let's be more interested in who a pastor is versus what they can do. And we tried to do that, and I feel like we eventually found somebody like that. That had a good godly character. So a church elder, they should have a godly character and be a godly example to others. All right, so I'm going to end the video here, and then we'll start back up with a second general qualification of what a church elder is, or what they should have.